Olivia slipped into the silk gown that hugged her figure perfectly, the deep emerald shade accentuating her features. She admired herself in the mirror, turning slightly to check her reflection. A life of luxury had kept her well kept, with frequent spa visits, designer wardrobes, and first-class vacations. The scent of expensive perfume lingered in the air as she adjusted her diamond earrings. Everything about her life was polished, pristine, and enviable. Daniel entered the bedroom, adjusting his cufflinks as he took in the sight of his wife. His eyes flickered with appreciation, the same way they always had. "You look stunning," he said, stepping closer to press a kiss to her cheek. "Every man at the gala will be jealous of me tonight." She smiled, though something in her chest felt hollow. "And every woman will be jealous of me," she replied, running a hand over his perfectly tailored tuxedo. "You always know how to steal the show." Daniel chuckled, wrapping an arm around her waist. "That's because I have the most beautiful woman in the room on my arm." His warmth surrounded her, the familiar scent of his cologne filling her senses. He was the kind of husband every woman dreamed of, successful, kind, generous. Olivia knew she should feel content, but a restless energy had been building inside her for months. She couldn't explain it. Daniel adored her, spoiled her, made sure she never had to lift a finger. Yet something inside her longed for a spark she couldn't find in their predictable life. The gala was grand, set in an extravagant ballroom with glittering chandeliers and golden decor. Guests mingled with glasses of champagne, conversations flowing about business, investments, and luxury lifestyles. Olivia moved through the room with practiced grace, flashing smiles and engaging in light-hearted chatter with acquaintances. Daniel stayed close, his arm occasionally brushing against hers, whispering compliments in her ear between conversations. She felt eyes on them, admiration, envy, curiosity. They were the power couple, the embodiment of success and perfection. Then she saw him. Mark stood near the bar, a glass of whiskey in hand, exuding effortless confidence. His presence commanded attention without trying, his sharp suit and relaxed posture making him seem like he belonged to a different kind of world, one filled with danger and excitement. His dark eyes met hers, and a slow smirk formed on his lips. She tore her gaze away quickly, feeling the heat rise to her cheeks. But the damage was done. The spark she had been missing for so long ignited with just one glance. Throughout the evening, she felt his presence lingering at the edge of her awareness. She tried to focus on Daniel, on the conversations, on maintaining the illusion of her perfect life. But every time she turned, Mark was there, watching, waiting. At one point, Daniel was pulled into a conversation with an investor, leaving Olivia momentarily alone. She made her way toward the bar, needing a moment to catch her breath. Before she could order a drink, a smooth voice interrupted her thoughts. "Your husband is a lucky man." She turned slightly, meeting Mark's gaze. Up close, he was even more striking, his features sharp, his smirk filled with something unreadable. Olivia let out a soft laugh. "And why is that?" Mark took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving hers. "Because if you were mine, I wouldn't let you out of my sight for even a second." Her heart pounded, a mix of surprise and intrigue washing over her. Bold words for a man who just met me. "I don't say things unless I mean them," he replied, setting his glass down. "And I have been watching you all night. You don't belong in a room full of men talking about stocks and investments. You belong somewhere else." She raised an eyebrow, amused despite herself. "And where would that be?" Mark leaned in slightly, his voice dropping just enough to make her skin tingle. "Anywhere you can feel alive." A nervous thrill ran through her. She glanced around, ensuring no one was paying attention. "And you think you can offer that?" His smirk deepened. "I know I can." The conversation was brief, fleeting, but it planted a seed in her mind. As the night went on, she found herself seeking him out in the crowd, their eyes meeting in silent acknowledgement. The gala ended with polite goodbyes, Daniel's hand resting on the small of her back as they exited. She smiled at the right moments, played the role of the devoted wife, but her mind was elsewhere. Lying in bed that night, she stared at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that something inside her had shifted. Days passed, but the memory of Mark lingered. A week later, she received an unexpected message. "Mark, I haven't stopped thinking about you." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She should ignore it. She had a perfect life, a perfect husband, but the craving for something more, something dangerous, overpowered the voice of reason. "Olivia, where do you want to meet?" The affair started slowly, small, careful meetings in public places, a coffee shop, a quiet lunch, a chance encounter at another event. Olivia told herself it was harmless, just a bit of flirtation, a game to break the monotony of her routine. But Mark was intoxicating. He had a way of making her heart race, of making her feel like the most desired woman in the world. His touches lingered longer, his words carried an unspoken promise. Then, one night, she crossed the line completely. A dimly lit hotel room, soft sheets, hurried hands, whispered confessions. The moment she gave in, there was no turning back. She told herself it was just once, then it became twice, then it became something she couldn't stop. Each time she returned home, she played the part of Daniel's loving wife with practiced ease. She laughed at his jokes, kissed him goodbye in the mornings, acted as if nothing had changed. But something had. And she had no idea that Daniel was already beginning to suspect. Daniel adjusted his tie in the mirror, watching Olivia through the reflection. She was standing by the bedroom window, her phone clutched in her hand, a small secretive smile playing on her lips. He had noticed it before, how her mood changed whenever she received certain messages, the way she became distant for no reason, the nervous glances at her phone whenever she thought he wasn't looking. Something was off. She had always been affectionate, always eager to talk about her day. But lately, she had been distracted, her mind somewhere else. Conversations felt forced. Her kisses felt rehearsed. She used to reach for his hand absent-mindedly, a habit she had developed early in their relationship, but now there was a gap between them, one she didn't even seem to notice. He picked up his wallet and keys from the dresser. "Are you coming to the company dinner this Friday?" Olivia turned quickly, slipping her phone into her pocket. "Friday?" Daniel nodded. "It's at the Ritz. A lot of important people will be there. It would mean a lot if you came." She hesitated, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Oh, I already made plans with Sophie. Girls' night." His jaw tightened slightly, but his expression remained neutral. "That's the third girls' night this month." She laughed lightly. "What can I say?" "We have a lot to catch up on." Daniel smiled, stepping forward to place a soft kiss on her forehead. "All right, have fun." As he pulled away, he noticed the flicker of relief in her eyes, a confirmation of what he had been suspecting. He walked out of the house, got into his car, and exhaled slowly. His grip on the steering wheel tightened. Olivia was lying to him. He had ignored the signs for too long, convincing himself that he was just being paranoid. That ends now. Instead of driving to work, he took a detour. The private investigator's office was in a quiet building on the other side of town. When he walked in, a man in his late 40s looked up from his desk, nodding in acknowledgement. "You must be Daniel," the investigator said, standing to shake his hand. "I got your message." What do you need me to do? Daniel sat down, his expression unreadable. I need you to follow my wife. The investigator leaned back, studying him for a moment. You think she's cheating? Daniel let out a dry laugh. I don't think. I know. The investigator nodded. All right, I'll need details. Where she goes, who she sees regularly, any places she might be sneaking off to. Daniel handed over a folder. I've already written down everything you need. The investigator flipped through the papers, raising an eyebrow. You came prepared. Daniel's voice was cold. I don't like to waste time. That evening, Olivia returned home late. Daniel was already sitting in the living room, a book in his lap, a glass of whiskey on the table beside him. He looked up as she walked in, forcing a warm smile. How was girls' night? She hesitated, then flashed him a bright smile. It was great. Sophie and I had dinner, then got drinks at that new rooftop bar. Daniel nodded. Sounds nice. You should have taken some pictures. She stiffened slightly, then quickly covered it with a shrug. I was too busy enjoying the moment. A lie. He already knew that there was no girls' night. The investigator had sent him updates. Olivia had not been with Sophie. She had been with him, a man named Mark. They had met at a private club, shared drinks, then disappeared into a hotel room for nearly 3 hours before she returned home. Daniel kept his expression calm, his movements steady as he reached for his drink. Glad you had fun. She smiled, clearly relieved that he wasn't questioning her further. She kissed his cheek, then walked upstairs humming softly. Daniel stared at the ice swirling in his glass. His mind was already forming a plan. Over the next few weeks, Olivia remained unaware that every step she took was being watched. The investigator sent daily reports, dates, locations, receipts, photos. Daniel studied each piece of evidence carefully. He saw the way Mark touched her, the way she leaned into him, the way she smiled in a way she no longer smiled at him. She had no idea she was walking straight into a trap. Daniel played his role perfectly, the loving husband, the unsuspecting fool. He bought her gifts, took her to expensive restaurants, made her feel completely safe. And Olivia? She kept lying. She told him she was at a yoga class when she was in a hotel room. She said she was having lunch with a friend when she was sneaking off to meet Mark. She kissed Daniel with the same lips she used to whisper to another man. Daniel's patience grew thin, but he forced himself to wait, because revenge was best served cold. One afternoon, Olivia stood in front of the bedroom mirror, adjusting her dress. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Daniel glanced over. Who's that? She picked it up quickly, locking the screen. Just Sophie. Daniel smiled. Tell her I said hi. She nodded, stuffing the phone into her purse. I have to go. Dinner with the girls. He stepped closer, brushing his lips over hers. Have fun. She left the house, completely unaware that Daniel already knew exactly where she was going. He sat down at his desk, opening his laptop. The investigator had set up a tracker on her phone. She was heading toward the same hotel. Daniel smirked, leaning back in his chair. Checkmate. Olivia stepped inside, closing the front door softly behind her. The dim lighting of the living room gave her a sense of relief, assuming Daniel had already gone to bed. She kicked off her heels, stretching her sore feet as she reached for her phone. A message from Mark flashed across the screen. Miss you already? A small smirk formed on her lips as she typed a quick reply. Me too. Talk soon. She tucked the phone into her purse and turned toward the stairs, ready to slip into bed beside her unsuspecting husband. A voice cut through the silence. Did you have fun tonight? Olivia froze, her breath catching in her throat. Daniel sat on the couch, his posture relaxed, one arm draped over the backrest. A glass of whiskey rested in his hand, the ice clinking softly as he swirled it. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, dark, piercing, sent a wave of unease through her. She swallowed, forcing a casual smile. "Yeah, it was nice. The girls and I—" "Spare me the lies," Daniel interrupted, his voice unnervingly calm. He leaned forward, setting the glass down on the coffee table. "Sit." Her pulse quickened. She hesitated for a moment before stepping forward, perching on the edge of the couch opposite him. "Daniel, what's wrong?" He let out a humorless chuckle. "That's what I'd like to ask you, Olivia." He reached to the side, grabbing a thick folder. He tossed it onto the table and the contents spilled out. Photographs, printed messages, timestamps. Olivia's heart stopped as she stared at the damning evidence in front of her. Images of her and Mark at a restaurant, in his car, entering a hotel. Screenshots of their texts, each one more incriminating than the last. Her entire body went cold. "You've been busy," Daniel murmured, watching her reaction closely. She scrambled to compose herself. I don't know what this is, but—" "Don't!" he snapped. His voice was still calm, but there was an edge to it now, a controlled fury beneath the surface. "Don't insult my intelligence by pretending you don't know exactly what this is." She clenched her hands together, struggling to find the right words. "Daniel, it's not what it looks like. He reached for his phone, tapping the screen. A voice recording began to play. Mark's voice filled the room. "God, I wish you didn't have to go back to him tonight." "I know," Olivia's own voice responded. "Just a little longer. Once I figure things out, I'll leave." The world around her started spinning. Daniel tilted his head. "You were planning to leave me?" She shook her head frantically. "No, I didn't mean it. Stop lying, Olivia," he said coldly. "It's pathetic." Tears welled in her eyes. "I was confused. I made a mistake, but I love you. I never stopped loving you." Daniel let out a slow exhale, rubbing his temples. "You love me?" He laughed, a bitter sound that cut through her like a knife. "Tell me, Olivia, did you love me when you were sneaking around behind my back? Did you love me when you let another man touch you? When you told him you'd leave me?" She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "Daniel, please, we can fix this. I swear I'll do anything." "You're right," he said, standing up. "You will do something. You're going to leave, right now." Her breath hitched. "What?" He walked to the side of the room and grabbed another folder from the console table. He tossed it onto the couch beside her. "Divorce papers, signed and finalized." Her stomach dropped. "No, you can't." "Oh, I can," he cut in sharply. "And I already have." She reached for the folder with shaking hands, flipping through the pages. Legal terms blurred together as her vision swam with tears. She looked up at him desperately. "Daniel, please, let's talk about this. We can go to therapy. We can—" "Therapy?" he repeated mockingly. "You think a few counselling sessions will undo what you did?" He shook his head. "No, Olivia. There's no fixing this. No second chances. I'm done." She gripped the papers, shaking her head in disbelief. "I don't even have anywhere to go." He smirked, but there was no humour in it. "Maybe Mark can take you in." "Oh, wait." He leaned in slightly. "He won't. He's been entertaining other women while you were busy ruining your marriage." Her chest tightened. "That's not true." Daniel pulled out his phone again, scrolling for a moment before tossing it onto the table. On the screen, a photo of Mark with another woman at the same hotel they had been meeting at. Reality slammed into her like a freight train. Mark had never cared about her. Daniel gave her one last look before stepping back. "You have 10 minutes to pack your things. Whatever's left, I'll have thrown out." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she stood up, clutching the papers in her hands. "Daniel, don't do this." He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the front door, pulling it open. A clear, final gesture. Her legs felt weak as she stumbled past him. out into the cold night, the door shut behind her, sealing her fate. Olivia stood outside the house, gripping her phone with trembling hands. The cold night air bit into her skin, but the chill inside her was far worse. She took a shaky breath and dialed Mark's number. The phone rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Tears welled in her eyes as she sent him a text. "Mark, I need you. Please call me back." Minutes passed and nothing. She shivered, hugging herself as she checked her bank app. The screen loaded and a pit formed in her stomach. Balance, $0.00. She gasped. That couldn't be right. She checked her credit card next, declined. Her breath came out in sharp, panicked gasps. She tried another card, declined. Daniel had done it. He had locked her out of everything. Her accounts, her cards, her entire financial lifeline had been cut off in an instant. She tried to call Daniel, her fingers moving frantically over the screen. It went straight to voicemail. Her car was still parked in the driveway, but as she tried the handle, the locks didn't budge. A text from Daniel appeared on her screen. "Everything you own was because of me. Now you have nothing. Goodbye, Olivia." Her legs gave out, and she slumped against the curb, her heart hammering wildly. She had nowhere to go. Her parents lived in another state, and after the affair was exposed, they had called her in disgust, telling her she had embarrassed the family. Her sister had sent a single text, "You're on your own." She clutched her phone, staring at the empty streets, her mind racing. She had no home, no money, no one to turn to. Her only hope was Mark. An hour later, she stood outside his apartment complex, her hands shaking as she knocked. The door opened slightly, revealing Mark's irritated expression. "Olivia?" He rubbed his eyes. "What the hell are you doing here?" She swallowed hard. "I have nowhere else to go. Daniel, he cut me off. I need a place to stay." Mark let out a low sigh and leaned against the doorframe. "Olivia, that's not my problem." Her breath caught. "What?" "I never signed up for this," he said, crossing his arms. "You said you were leaving him. You lied. Now you're here, expecting me to pick up the pieces?" He scoffed. "I don't do baggage." She stared at him in disbelief. "So what?" "You were just using me?" Mark smirked. "What did you think this was? Love?" He shook his head. "You were fun, that's all." Tears streamed down her face. "Please, I don't have anywhere to go." Mark shrugged. "That's not my problem." The door shut in her face. Olivia sat on the sidewalk outside his apartment, numb with shock. Her mind replayed the moment Daniel had confronted her, the moment Mark had thrown her away, the moment she had lost everything. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She wiped her face quickly, hope flickering inside her. Maybe Daniel had changed his mind. Maybe he had found it in himself to forgive her. But when she checked the message, it wasn't from Daniel. It was from an unknown number, a forwarded screenshot. Her stomach twisted as she read the words. "Thought you should see what everyone's saying about you." Her hands shook as she clicked the link. It led to a private group chat, one she had been removed from. Friend 1. "Did you guys see what Olivia did? I can't believe she cheated on Daniel." Friend 2. "Honestly, she deserves everything she's getting." Friend 3. "She had the perfect life. She ruined it for what? A fling? What an idiot." Friend 4. "Daniel was always too good for her. At least now he can find someone who actually loves him." Her throat closed. This wasn't just between her and Daniel anymore. Everyone knew. The next few days blurred into a nightmare. She called every friend she could think of, but one by one, they ignored her calls. Some blocked her number entirely. She tried staying at a motel, but her cards had been cancelled. She tried finding a job, but everywhere she went, people knew who she was. Employers politely rejected her, their smiles tight as they subtly glanced at their phones. She knew they had seen the articles, the messages, the posts spreading like wildfire. By the end of the week, Olivia had nothing left but a suitcase and the few crumpled bills she had found at the bottom of her purse. She wandered through the city, exhaustion weighing down on her. Her reflection in a shop window made her stomach turn, dark circles under her eyes. Clothes that once looked elegant now wrinkled and stained, her once perfect hair unkempt. A far cry from the woman who used to walk into high-end boutiques, Daniel's credit card in hand, greeted by staff who admired her wealth and status. Now, people barely looked at her, and when they did, it was with pity or judgment. She had lost everything. Days passed. She sat on a bench in the park, her stomach twisting with hunger. She had spent her last few dollars on a cheap sandwich, and now she had nothing left. She clutched her phone, staring at Daniel's name in her contacts. A part of her wanted to call, to beg, to plead. But deep down, she knew. He was never going to take her back. She had broken something that could never be fixed. Her hands trembled as she shut off her phone. For the first time in her life, she was completely alone. Daniel stood at the edge of the ballroom, adjusting the cuffs of his suit as the laughter and chatter of the guests filled the room. The fundraiser had been a success, bringing in high-profile investors, influential names, and a new sense of purpose to his work. His company was thriving, his reputation intact, and for the first time in years, he felt completely free. Beside him, Sophia, an accomplished event planner with a sharp mind and a warm smile, glanced up at him. "Are you enjoying yourself?" Daniel turned to her, his lips curling into a genuine smile. "More than I thought I would," Sophia laughed lightly. "I take full credit for that," he chuckled, nodding. "I suppose you should." Across the room, whispers and stolen glances followed him, but none of it mattered anymore. He had rebuilt his life without Olivia, and it was the best decision he had ever made. Meanwhile, Olivia sat at the small cafe across the street, watching through the large windows as Daniel effortlessly charmed the people around him. Her fingers gripped the edge of her empty coffee cup, the ceramic cold against her skin. Her hair, once perfectly styled, hung in loose waves, and the expensive clothes she used to flaunt were replaced by a simple dress that barely held the elegance she once carried. She had spent the last 6 months trying to piece her life back together, but nothing had gone as she had hoped. She had lost everything. Mark had disappeared, leaving her without a place to stay. Her friends abandoned her, unwilling to risk their reputations by associating with her. Her family refused to take her in, ashamed of the scandal she had caused. No one wanted to hire her. Every interview ended the same way, the employer glancing at their phone, recognizing her name, and politely ending the conversation within minutes. Even the people she once looked down on pitied her now. She had been forced to rent a small apartment in a run-down part of town, using what little she had left to keep a roof over her head. But the worst part was seeing Daniel thrive without her. She had expected him to struggle, to miss her, to reach out eventually. But instead, he had erased her completely. Her fingers hovered over her phone, staring at his name, Daniel. She had called dozens of times. Each call went straight to voicemail. She had sent countless texts, each one unanswered. She had even shown up at his office once, only to be turned away by security. He had cut her off, as if she had never existed. A lump formed in her throat as she watched him lean in slightly, whispering something to Sophia that made her laugh. The sight of it stabbed through her like a knife. That used to be her. She used to be the woman by his side, the one he adored, the one he spoiled, protected, and loved unconditionally. Now, she was nothing. She reached for her phone and typed another message. Olivia. Daniel, please, just talk to me. One last time. Her hands shook as she hit send. She waited, staring at the screen, hoping for the dots that would indicate a response. Minutes passed, then an hour. Nothing. She refreshed the message thread, but there was no reply. Her breathing turned uneven as she watched him lift a glass in a toast, surrounded by people who still respected him, people who still valued him. Tears burned in her eyes as she realized the unforgiving truth. Daniel wasn't ignoring her out of anger. He simply didn't care anymore. He had moved on, and she was just a forgotten mistake. Her grip on the phone loosened, and she set it down on the table, staring at the dim reflection of herself in the cafe window. For the first time, true regret crushed her completely. She had betrayed the only man who ever truly loved her, and in doing so she had lost everything. There was no fixing this, no redemption, no second chance. Her punishment wasn't Daniel's revenge. It was knowing that she had destroyed her own life, and now she would have to live with it forever,